Okay, so what I'd like to do is make a short video that basically does what we would normally do after we go over an exam, which is the next step is to talk about the next exam. So one of the first things you'll notice when you're looking at this playlist, and even just the folder on Talent, is you'll notice that there's a lot of content on urinary. People ask me all the time, DJ, why do you keep saying that the urinary system is the most difficult system in AP2? It's because you have to have your ducks in a row for this section. There's so much content. There's so many multiple choice. The test format is kind of challenging. There's more multiple choice than normal, so you really have to get your ducks in a row. And what are your ducks in a row? You want to get good at multiple choice. You want to do all the multiple choice options you have, whether that's the practice test, the learning catalytics, the study questions, or the questions that are in the PowerPoint itself. You also don't want to cram. This information builds and builds and builds on itself, and so it doesn't really lend itself to cramming. One of the examples is this sheet from Talent. So this is our typical 11 by 17, and this thing in the middle is the functional unit of the kidney called the glomerulus. And there's a lot of different functions of the glomerulus. One of the first things is you'll hear me when you listen to the video, you hear me say this a lot of times, is what the kidney does is filters everything smaller than the protein. If you think about it, that's kind of the way it has to do it. It can't have transporters that recognize every chemical that might come into your body. What it has to do is it has to recognize the good stuff. It throws out all the bad stuff. It keeps the good stuff. And then you're only going to get rid of the bad stuff. And that's a very complex procedure. If you watch the video, glomerular filtration rate has to be pretty well balanced, because if it's too high, you're going to urinate out things that you don't want to lose. So if it's too high, you're going to lose good things. And if it's too low, you're not going to get rid of bad things, and so you're not going to filter. And so we're going to spend hours on just this part of the diagram, and you need to know this part of the diagram before you know this one. And then you need to know this one before you know this one. And so it just doesn't lend itself well to cramming. The urinary system does not lend itself well to cramming. Other things to hit on this is there's a lot of drawings on this one. So we'll draw out edema and we'll add to it. We drew out the center section before, but we'll add to it with this outside stuff. You know, normally I'd ask students to memorize these electrolyte charts, so I would make a test and leave some of these blank. Sometimes I tell my students that this is the one section of this class where it might be actually like your program courses, where there's so much content, so much intensity, that it's a pretty good preview of what it's going to be like in your program courses, no matter what your program course is. And I often tell students too, especially if you're going to nursing or PT or respiratory therapy, things like that, you really need to know this stuff. You need to know these electrolytes and how the body can alter these electrolytes, and then what the consequences can be. And it all starts with a fairly complex drawing. So GFR is controlled really well by the kidneys. In fact, it has to be controlled so well that there's multiple mechanisms. And even in the last 10 years, we've realized that there's a whole nother mechanism that makes sure that flow through the kidney is properly balanced. So again, multiple drawings, multiple content, and it's all going to build. And so that's why there's this huge playlist. Honestly, my very first video was GFR, and it's kind of old here because it was the reason I started YouTube in the first place. I think this video is from 2009. And
what we're going to talk about is something called
so
filtration rate. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly.
I like to keep these videos still up here, even though they're back in the day when YouTube would only let you upload 10 minutes, because still people link to these videos. So that's why it's there. But anyway, the whole reason I started YouTube in the first place is because you have to listen to the things about the urinary system multiple times so that the connections can be made. Again, the metaphor is it's like you're juggling. Throw one ball in the air, that's pretty easy. 2 balls is not too bad, but it's pretty hard to get them all going. And so you have to think about multiple things at the same time when you're trying to understand the urinary system and electrolytes. And then hopefully you're also realizing, boy, we've seen sodium, potassium, and calcium so many times that we know that those are pretty important. So I made these little diagrams down at the bottom to help remind you when we've seen sodium before and all the things that sodium does. When have we seen potassium? And one of the things, I'm going to do some examples here. One of the things you're going to see is potassium is the least controlled of the different things, and so it's often the one that leads to lethality because we can't control that one as well. Or all the times you've seen calcium in the body, so you have to control these electrolytes really well. So that's why this is really challenging. Again, what I do with these outlines is I pretend that either my daughter or my wife or someone I know is trying to take this class, and what advice would I give them in order to be successful? I don't necessarily want to make it easy, because you have to rise to the challenge if you're going to make it through your program courses, but I also want to give you as much help as I can. And so I've actually divided this up into multiple sections. It's actually 8 pages long, which I'm a little embarrassed because I'm a little bit wordy, but the urinary system is just that important. So you're going to want to begin by setting a foundation by making sure you know your anatomy, 5 functions. And what I've tried to do here is This side of the 11 by 17 kind of outlines that. These are the major kidney functions. So get that first and get the kidney anatomy first. Then at the beginning, getting started, this is my best coaching that I can do to coach you how to get a good start. The PRS questions are the questions that are in the PowerPoint. So again, you're going to want to go through and just start laying a map in your brain of what you need to know. And again, it's going to take a lot of repetition to get all the connections in this section. Then I have another section that's midway, so we do take 3 weeks for this section, or it might be 4. I'll get a calendar together. But you might want to go a week and a half and then check yourself to make sure that you're where you need to be. And then the week before the test, this is where I think your final step is. There are so many ahas and interesting things in the urinary system. I would really take the time to feel brilliant and see those connections. Why is it when I throw up that gives me muscle cramps versus if I just lay on the couch when I have the flu? And the flu doesn't really make you throw up. Let's go say norovirus. I'm going to go through some examples. I'm hoping to put this video together real shortly. So test format, there's going to be 40 multiple choice, and I would say these are going to be some of the more challenging ones, where you have to put together a sequence of information. You have to know lots in your head. Connections are something that I'll talk about in a second once I go to test format. You're going to